Okay, let's get started. So here's what we're covering today. We're covering target profile and now target profile is one of the biggest headaches that a lot of people have. And the reason for that is simply that it's scary to do a target profile because you have to go outside of your comfort zone just to do this thing. So the thing that we're going to look at, let's start off with this idea of what the target profile is. Now, every day, Renuka and I go for a walk, and one day there was this pebble in my shoe. And I couldn't figure out what was happening because as I took the shoe off, and then there was no pebble in it. And so I put the shoe back on and start walking, and then there was a feeling of a pebble in it, but there was no pebble in it. And take the shoe off, put the shoe back, take the shoe off, put the shoe back. Eventually, I figured out that the pebble was in my socks, and that was really frustrating. So this is the kind of thing that happens with target profile. What we think is a very high level kind of situation usually ends up being this pretty low level or very small pebble in the shoe, which is very frustrating and at times intimidating to people. And that's really what we're going to do today with target profile. So I'm just going to, some of these screens are in my way, so I'm just going to move them off. So the client problem is always very precise, and that's what you've got to figure out. What we're going to do in this webinar is we're going to take about 30 to 35 minutes to go through this. Then you can write down your learning as you go along, because at the end I'll ask you if you've learned something. And then at the end you can ask questions, and I'll be around for as long as you need. So write down whatever questions you have and whatever learning you have. So the agenda for today, first, we're going to cover is interview preparation for the target profile. Second, the interview stage. And third is testing the result. So let's start off with the first thing, which is the interview preparation. I had, a long time ago, decided that I was going to do stock cartoons. And my idea of stock cartoons was, okay, you're going to have a lot of cartoons. They're going to be able to be used in blogs, on websites, all over the place. And so my idea was that stock cartoons were going to be this thing that I used on a regular basis, just like I did with this presentation. I was able to put this presentation together in a couple of hours because there were so many, like there were 450 cartoons that I could choose from. And that was my idea until I spoke to Jen. And Jen was the target profile. And she was like, yeah, it's nice, but I can get stock cartoons all over the place. I don't have to buy your stock cartoons for that. So then I go, why do you want to buy these stock cartoons? And she says, because when I put together presentations or books or anything, what I end up is with a Frankenstein kind of situation. They all look completely different. They're all in different styles, different sizes. There is no consistency between them. And so there is a consequence. My whole book or presentation looks like a mishmash of everything. What we're seeing here is our perception compared with the client's perception. And it's very crucial that we understand what the client is thinking, because we think that the client must think exactly like us, and that's not true at all. This was my experience. So when you're preparing for your target profile, the first thing you have to do is just make get a Post-it and write down your own version. What do you think the client is going to do and how they're going to react? What do you think is the client's biggest problem? What problem are you solving for them? Now, these are 2 or 3 questions that I'm asking you, but essentially what you're doing is you're just writing down your perception. And you think this is a pointless exercise. Why are we going to do this when the client is going to end up finding a completely different angle? It's not as pointless as you think, because what it's doing is it's training you. Today you might have just one product or one service. Tomorrow you might have 2 or 3 or 4, and it's training you to realize that most copywriters, most business owners are wrong. They have this perception of what clients want and what clients, and they think about what clients want, but they're wrong because the client comes from a different perspective. So they're not entirely wrong, but they're partially wrong. They're not able to get the emotion, the words, the phraseology. None of that stuff is easy, even for a trained copywriter, let alone someone who's just struggling to put a sales page together. And the client solves this problem just by giving you everything, the framework, the information that you need. So that is a very short opening, but essentially what it tells you is that you've got to make sure that you write down what you think, and then you go in for the interview, which is what we're going into the second part. Now, what does the interview stage consist of? It consists of a few things, and we'll cover these: too many options, the biggest problem, and objections. When we're going into an interview, what we end up doing is we have all of these bags of the brain audit. So when you look at a target profile interview, what are you really trying to achieve? Well, you're trying to get the problem, you're trying to get the solution, you're trying to get all of these things which are in the brain audit, all those 7 red bags. And I think that's too much. I mean, ideally that should be the goal, but I think it's too much. So we're just going to focus on 2 things, which is the biggest problem and the objections. But let's start off with the chaos. I've done target profile interviews for our products, and people have done target profile interviews, you know, having called me. And in both cases, it ends up like a shopping list. What do I mean by shopping list? You know, when you go to buy something at the supermarket, you end up with a shopping list. There are 10 different things or 15 different things that you want, but some are more urgent than others. What happens in a target profile interview is that you end up with everything. The client gives you all the possible problems that they have, and after a while you lose track of what you're trying to achieve there. You lose track of what is their biggest problem, and it becomes very confusing for you as a person. And if you listen to many of these target profile interviews or you read the transcript, you'll find this recurs over and over again. The client starts down one path, but then gets swayed by something else. The conversation is playing out, and yeah, it's normal for a conversation to go down a path that you don't expect. So you're going to get that chaos. You're going to get this confusion where the client is going to bring up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 problems. So what we've got to focus on is we've got to avoid this confusion, and we have to stick to the biggest problem and the objections. And these are the 2 things that we need to work on. So what is the biggest problem? When we go, usually when we go and start to speak to a client and we ask them, you know, what is the biggest problem that you're facing in your business with regard to whatever you're selling? Say you're a yoga teacher, or you're selling IT, or you're selling, you know, sales conversion, or whatever. Whatever it is you're selling, that client is not going to tell you their biggest problem. They're just going to tell you the biggest problem that's related to your business. So you ask them, what is your biggest problem? And then they come up with an answer. So for instance, the client might say, I'm exhausted all the time. Well, that's not enough because that's too broad. But at some point in that conversation, very quickly, you might nail it down to why are you exhausted? And they'll say, because of perfectionism. Okay, so now we have a starting point. What does that mean? And it kind of rolls out like this, and I'm going to read this even though it's on screen because some people are listening in. So pardon me if you're just reading it and it's boring because I'm reading the second time. But it says, I'm exhausted all the time. It's because I have to go, because I have this curse of perfectionism. I'm so afraid to let things go. And I keep working at it because I'm afraid others will judge me. That means I stay up later at night at work, longer on projects, and it's driving me crazy. Plus, I don't think I should exercise. I don't exercise as much as I should, and I don't think I'm giving my family enough attention. So already this is like just one paragraph, but there is all this family coming in and the exercise and all of this stuff. Once we understand this thing, what we're seeing here is exhausted all the time because of perfectionism. That is the biggest problem. But then, shortly after that, she's giving you the consequences of what's happening. The jump, that chasm that people have is they don't know, well, how do I take these words that someone has said and then put them on the sales page? And the answer is you turn this into you. So just let's read the same thing with you. Is perfection causing you to be exhausted? Do you struggle with the curse of perfectionism? Do you feel it's hard to let things go? And then you stop with the questions, because if you keep asking 15,000 questions, they're going, the sales page looks very contrived, very, I can't think of another word, but very boring to read. It's just a whole bunch of questions. So ask 2 or 3 questions. Is perfection causing you to be exhausted all the time? Do you struggle with perfectionism? Do you find it's hard to let things go? And then you roll as a just like you would explain to someone, as a perfectionist, you may find hard to let things go. You feel that others will judge you. And it's not unusual to stay later at night, to work longer on projects. And this drives you crazy sooner or later. You tend to get into a bit of a grind. You don't exercise as much you should. And it's not unusual to feel that you're neglecting your family. So I've tweaked it around, even though it's slightly different on screen. And what you're trying to do is just trying to have a conversation there rather than write sales copy. It's almost like you're explaining a problem that someone has. What we've done here is we've just taken, on the left-hand side, I'm exhausted all the time. It's because I have this curse of perfectionism, and we've flipped it to the, is perfection causing you to be exhausted all the time? Do you struggle? And it's not the world's best copy, but that's really much better than what a lot of people do. The reason why it's not the world's best copy is actually a benefit, because it starts to read like conversation. It starts to read like something that you would speak to in real life. And a lot of people end up writing this copy that's very unreal. It seems like it's trying to get at all the problems. So if you notice, we've just stayed with the biggest problem. And for you to understand how you can take this and run with it, just go to any of the psychotactics pages, start reading the biggest problem, and see how quickly the solution comes up. So when we go to this situation, when we have this situation where we're in front of the client, or we're on the phone and we're interviewing them, it's best to focus on the biggest problem. Get the biggest problem, get the consequences that they're feeling because of the problem, and that's it. That's the problem. In the past, I've said that you can go with the other problems, but it soon gets very convoluted, and you don't know what is the biggest thing. So trying to stay within this framework of just the biggest problem, what are the consequences of the problem, I think you're going to find it's easier to do a target profile interview. So now what we've got is we've got the problem sequence, but now we have to go to the second most important thing, which is getting the objections. And there is a reason why the objections are crucial. See, once you have the problem and the consequences, that's the biggest problem and the consequence of that problem, you can get the solution. That's not too hard. It's the opposite of the biggest problem. And the client might be able to tell you that later or whatever time, but it's fine. The second thing that you're looking for in this interview is the objections, because that's what's going to stop the client from buying your product. I mean, it's the most obvious thing. The objections are not frequently asked questions. They're objections. I don't want to do this because I just did a course and it didn't work for me, or this price is too high, or they'll have objections. And knowing the objections become crucial for 2 reasons. First is, when you have the objections, you can then reduce those objections or remove them completely by bringing them up and then explaining why they're not objections. But the second thing, and this is even more crucial, is it allows you, it gives you the framework for what kind of testimonials you're going to get. So when you look at a testimonial is the reverse side of the same coin, of the objection coin. So if a client says, you know, the price is too high, the testimonial that you need to get from your client, from other clients or that client, is that I thought the price was too high, but here's what I found. Every time you're looking at the testimonial, look at it as an objection being answered by the client, not by you. And that becomes very crucial, because the moment you've got 5 or 6 objections, you also have 5 or 6 of the biggest things that would stop people from buying your product or your service. And now you've got testimonials from clients. Maybe you don't have clients, and this is the question that everyone also asks: what if I don't have clients? Every new product doesn't have clients. If tomorrow I were to put up a book on, say, talent, well, no one's read it, there are no testimonials. If a company like Amazon or Apple puts out a new product, they've had clients in the past, but they put out a new product, they don't have testimonials. So this is similar for everyone. You just have to work at it and go out there and get the testimonials from people who are going to test it, come up with their objections, and then bring it up. So this is, we're going slightly off tangent here, but this is just an objection that you get. So where are we so far? We started out with the first thing, which is go out there, get the biggest problem, get the consequences. You flip it around to you when you're writing the sales page. In that same interview, you want to get the main objections, and then you get a testimonial from that client or other clients. And as a result, now you've got the main bones of the sales page: the problem, the solution. You've already covered the target profile. You've got the objections, the testimonials, and now you only have risk reversal and uniqueness. So that's a very good go for just this limited number of things that you have to do: problem, objections, and that's it. You're out of there. So what we covered so far in the interview stages, the first thing is that when we go into a target profile interview, there's always going to be chaos, because they come up with this massive list of things that you know, massive list of problems that they're having, and we get lost in it. So avoid that. Just stick with the biggest problem. The second thing is you want to get the objections, because the objections reduce the risk, so you know in advance what the objections are, and it also leads to the testimonials. So this brings us to the end of the second part. We covered 2 parts. The first is writing the stuff down so you have your own perception, and then the second thing is getting the problem and the objections. So that's where we are right now. The interview preparation, the interview stage. And this takes us to the third part, which is just as crucial, which is the testing phase. Now, when I was in advertising, what we'd do is we'd make an ad and then show it to someone, and they go, oh yeah, that's fine. So this is usually the client. You show it to someone, but this is not the way that the client's client or the consumer looks at it. So the consumer is sitting on a bench reading it in a newspaper, but it's not just your ad in the newspaper. There are 15 other ads. There's editorial. There's a whole bunch of other stuff around it. And what we tend to do when we're putting things on a sales page, we've done this target profile interview, and we now go to the target profile in Microsoft Word, so in a Word document or text document, or we print it out and we show it to them, and we're so proud of it. But that's not how it works. You have to go across media. So let's say it's on a web page. Say I wrote this sales thing. I would have to show the client on the sales page how it looks, and they would have to give me their feedback based on how the sales page looks. And what we tend to do is we send it out in Microsoft Word or other documents, and that's not how it looks. So if it's going to be on video and you're making a video, well, make a sort of video that the client can look at. If you're going to make a Facebook ad, put it in a situation where the client can see it as they would see it on Facebook. So really what you're doing is you're giving the client a real life experience of how their ad is going to be seen with all the distractions. So if it's on TV, if it's on radio, whatever the medium, you've got to test it out in that medium with all the distractions, because this is kind of how the client sees it. It's like Times Square, all these lights, everything's flashing, there's noise around. And in the middle of it, there is your ad, there is your sales page. Now you might think, well, on my sales page, there are no ads. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised at how many people have pop-ups and how many people have ads that they've forgotten about, and those ads are coming. So for instance, I had a musician who who sold stuff for say $15,000 at a time, and that was one of his big things. But at the same time, he's got ads for 20 cents or 50 cents, some crazy products, and it sits on the same page. I can tell you, it doesn't matter how great that sales page is, those ads are distracting. And those ads are causing your message to go haywire. Your client will tell you that the moment you create that sales page, send it out to them in the same format that they're supposed to see it. And yes, I know it's a lot of work, but that's how you have to do it. You can do it by just sending out a document, but be aware that it's not as great as actually watching it or seeing it on the place where it's supposed to be. Anyway, once you've put it on that page, these are the questions you ask the client. What's wrong? What's wrong with, we did the target profile interview. Is this accurate? Is this how you feel about the product or the service? So first, what's wrong? You also want to know what's right, because that gives you an indication, a strong indication of where you were paying attention and where you were not. And finally, what you would fix. Now you would think, well, why do you need the third question? You'll be surprised at what things people come up with when you ask them what you would fix. So it's always good to keep that third question in an open question. Now you've got what's wrong, what's right, and what you would fix. And that brings us to the summary. What we covered so far was, the first was the interview preparation. We started out with writing things down on a little sheet of paper, on a notepad, your perception of what the client thinks. And it's very crucial because it gets rid of all this nonsense of all these things that people make, which is, this is Tom and he lives in a house and he's got 3 dogs. And you realize very quickly that all of that is nonsense, because that's not how real life works. That's not how a client is going to react to you. So always do the preparation, because it shows you how wrong you are. And you think, well, I'm going to be wrong. What's the problem? It's a pointless exercise. It's a good exercise. It's a before and after. At the interview stage, we go through understanding that there is going to be chaos, that the client is going to tell you every single problem that they possibly have with regard to your service or product. And that's staying with the biggest problem, the consequences. That's really cool. And then getting the objections are very crucial, because that leads you to getting the testimonials later down the track, which counter those objections. Because testimonials and objections are flip sides of the same coin, or the same Oreo if you are into Oreos. And then finally, testing the result. Testing the result, you want to do it as far as possible in the same medium. And you want to ask those questions, which is, wait 1 second, what was wrong with it? What is right with it? And what else would you fix? And that gets you much further down the track with target profile interviews than trying to cover everything, which is something that most people do. They try to cover everything, and I don't blame them, because we haven't specifically said you should cover 3 things or 2 things or 1 thing. And so they do everything, and you end up with this chaos. I recently did a client, someone called me, wanted me to be the target profile. And that's the reason why I'm doing this, because I gave them everything. So they were more confused than ever. And yep, what's your next step? Now, this is not a sales page. This is and a podcast, and it's an article. And if you listen to it, I would recommend that you listen to it 2 or 3 times. The same thing with reading it. So if you go to this page, psychotactics.com/guidelines-sales-pages, so guidelines-sales-pages, then you can listen to this podcast, and it'll show you the kind of chaos that you go through with any target profile interview, and how you need to step out of it. It goes in a lot more detail than we have here, and I didn't want to clutter up what we have here, so that's your next step. So that's it again, psychotactics.com/guidelines-sales-pages. That's pretty much it. So let's go to learning, and then we'll go to questions, and I'm going to be here as long as you need. So we'll just close the screen, and if I can get back. Okay, so here we are. Now I seem to have lost the, 1 second. Okay, so if you have any questions, all you have to do is unmute yourself and then ask the question, and that would be the best way to go. So go for it. Who wants to ask the first question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
My name is Lana. I'm from Russia, Moscow.
Yep.
I missed a bit that part to write my perception of what the client thinks. Do you mean the target profile client? And do I write this to eliminate my mistakes, what I think about the client, that he has a dog, like you said, that he actually might not have a dog? So do I need to actually talk to the client? I mean, how does this writing works in combination with my talk with the client? I'm not quite clear with this.
Okay,
part.
that's cool. It's a good question, because the dog is irrelevant. You know that link that I sent you right at the end? It makes fun of the dog. It makes fun, not because we don't like dogs, but essentially what happens is when we sit in an advertising agency, and when you sit in some of these places, they talk about the dogs and the onions and the oranges, and it's all irrelevant. When a client says, I'm exhausted, it has no relevance to her dog. She might love her dog, but it has no relevance to the dog. Where she lives, no relevance to that. What education she had, no relevance to that. So when you're creating this persona, you're creating all of these things which have no relevance to the crucial problem. You as a yoga teacher are trying to solve a problem. You as a conversion specialist are trying to solve a problem. What difference does it make where she lives, what dog she has, how many husbands she has? It doesn't make any difference. At some level, it might skew things if you're going into a very small segment. So for instance, if you say, okay, we have these people who are writing their first book, knowing that target audience makes a difference, but knowing each one of them is going to have different lives. And yet, all of them writing their first book are going to have the same problem. That means they're going to have a problem of getting stuck somewhere in the middle. Maybe that's what they say. And then what are the consequences? Well, the consequences are several months pass by, they don't write anything, they feel like everybody else is getting ahead, they feel like failures, and now you're solving that problem. What has the dog got to do with it? Nothing. So why do we do this thing about the perception? Is we go in saying, okay, these are all the beginner writers, I think they're getting stuck in the middle. And they might not be getting stuck in the middle. So what the perception, that little post-it does for you, is it shows you that you have to go out there and meet the client, or at least call them and record the interview. Because if you don't, then you're running on your perception, which in my experience has usually been wrong. What I mentioned earlier was that when I decided I'm going to sell some cartoons, I decided, okay, they'll want cartoons because it solves the problem of not having cartoons. That was not the problem. Their problem was more specific. It was, if I can get cartoons all over the internet. The only reason I would buy cartoons from you is because there is this unity, there is this coherence. All the cartoons look similar, and so my book doesn't look like a Frankenstein product or production. My video doesn't look like that. So it seems like a really stupid thing to do, to just write something down knowing that you're going to be wrong anyway. But it helps remind you time and time again that we are not able to predict what the client wants. And the best person is to go to the client and ask them. So I hope that, I don't know if that answers your question.
Perfect.
Yeah?
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Sean. This is Francois Janssen.
Yep.
Do you
Nice.
hear me?
Yes,
Yeah?
I can.
Yeah,
Yep.
great. Okay, I'm helping the diabetes coach with her marketing. And diabetes have, for instance, problems with the blood sugar level,
Yep.
but also with being tired and all that kind of problems.
Yep.
So where to start with the problem? Should I choose one? Because in a conversation, they probably mention more than one problem they have.
Yes. So that link that I sent you to, you know, the psychotactics.com/guidelines/sales/pages, it shows you how to go about doing that. Essentially,
Okay.
what you're doing there is you're ranking, but not ranking by 1, 2, 3, but ranking with pebbles. So it shows you in that how to go about system. So ideally, we go in and we say, everything's going to be fine. We're going to say, what's your biggest problem? They're going to answer coherently. They're going to answer systematically, and they might not. They might come up with 5 different problems. Well, now you have the problem. And so how do you solve that problem? You solve that problem. It's there in that podcast and the notes. So you can read it or listen to it. I would suggest you do both if you can.
Okay.
That will solve that problem, which is how, if that's your question, which is how do I know which one is the biggest problem, that will solve your problem. But now you have to do 2 steps. Yeah, you have to do 2 steps. So if they are very clear on their problem, then you only have to do 1 step, which is the first interview. If they go rambling 4 or 5 things, it might not be possible to have all of those 5 things ranked in that same interview because they're so emotional about the whole thing. You might have to say, is it okay if I call you back with, you know, this stuff, and then you go through a ranking. And usually if they've spent all that time, they will say yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, that was your question, right? It was about how do you...
Right.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, this is Lana again.
Yep.
Am I correct on this, that we forget about traditional system of writing target profile as like age, place of living, I don't know, family status and so on? We just forget about that and we concentrate on the problem, and that gets us to the results that we want. Am I correct?
You're correct. Yeah. There is no traditional system. It's somebody decided to do something at some point in time. They put it together. A lot of books got printed. Everyone came to the same conclusion. So
okay, I see.
yeah, it's not.
Okay.
People look for the answer, right? And if it's there in the book, then it must be fine. And so they just follow what's there. But it doesn't work out in real life. In real life, if you're teaching someone how to draw better, their dog has no relevance. Where they live has no relevance. It just doesn't have any relevance. You can do it, but what it's going to do to get to the specifics is, I don't know. I've never found it to be of any use. You can go through the exercise. It's fine. You're not going to use it. That's all.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hi, Sean. Susie here.
Hi, Susie.
Hi. So I just wanted to ask you, like before you mentioned the objections and how important it is to go through the objections with a client. But I was wondering if you have put some thought on what would be the best objection questions. Because there's something about powerful questions that can bring about powerful answers, and so because this is such a key material on the interview, I was wondering, like, when you're asking objections, like, how do you actually address what it is that the client is feeling that might be impeding him or her to make a decision?
That's a good question. I haven't thought of what questions you would ask specifically, but I think the often when we say, so what objections do you have to buying this product, or what problem do you have? The client goes, I don't know what problem. I don't know what objections. So we almost have to approach it in a conversation, as in, when we're buying something, we often aren't sure why we're buying that. And do you have this feeling of, yeah, this sounds good, but I'm not quite clear about certain things. Can you kind of explain to me why you would not go ahead with such a purchase? Why you not sign into something like that? I just want to like improve this later on, but using words like sign in would immediately get the person to go, oh, what am I signing in for? But if you go, if you were considering this product or this service, then what are the things that you'd go, I'm not really sure. And that kind of open ends the question into, yeah, these are the things that I would say I'm not really sure about. Whereas the moment you start to use, why would you not hit the buy now button? Why would you not sign in? Why would you not sign up? What are your objections? It's more difficult to think when you ask those kind of questions, simply because that's not how we speak. We say, you're not going to the picnic. What's the problem? We're not going to buy these spoons. We just looked for half an hour. Why are we not going ahead with this purchase? Why are we not buying these spoons? So we don't tend to use words like, oh, Renuka, what are your objections to buying these spoons?
Yeah. No, because that's how, when you were explaining it, I thought, like, wow, this sounds like the meat of what we're talking about here. And you really want to ask in a way that you hear the real thing, right?
Correct.
Instead of getting the client even more confused and like, yep. I don't know, because he might say price.
Yep.
That's the most common fear people have. But it might not be priced, it might be like, well, I don't know you. I don't know if you're good enough.
Correct.
I don't know if you're, going to give me value for my money. Something different, right? Deeper, deeper than just a shallow answer.
Yeah. So for instance, this guy was interviewing me about travel agents, and I only use travel agents because I found them to be far superior than me spending time on the internet. It's just a waste of my time. We end up with arguments, blah, blah, blah. That was my problem. But when it comes to objections, he might think that the price of the travel agent is my issue, and it's not. In fact, most people that work with travel agents have very convoluted, very complex travel. So they go from, Auckland to Vancouver to Lisbon, and there are these connections, and you should try doing this on the internet. It takes up like a whole day. If you have somebody else with you, they're usually saying, oh, maybe let's look at this other website, or let's do this. And you end up with a headache, you end up with a argument, you end up with a ton of problems. And you can call a travel agent and this gets solved sometimes in 15 minutes and you've spent the whole day. So the travel agent is very crucial. So what's my objection to travel agents? And that is, I have met with a lot of dunderheads before. That's my objection. These people are just trying to process my stuff instead of trying to understand me. And so that's my problem. And he goes, but what if I were to charge you $100 more for the strip, or $200 more? I'm okay with that. It's a service. I'm not trying to get the best rate. I'm trying to get my job done, just like I get the, my accounts done by accountant, my lawns done by somebody, by a lawn mowing guy. I pay for that service. I'm okay with paying for the service. But so that's one of the objections. The other objection would be that they don't pay attention to my recurring needs. So I want to fly. I don't want to fly by A380s. I want to fly by 777s because the air pressure is a little better. I want to sit in this part of the flight. I want to do this. I want to fly not before 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I have all of those things. That's what a travel agent is supposed to do. If they just throw everything at me, I'm not interested in it, because now I have to do the whole thing myself. So these are objections. And to go back to your question, these objections would come up in conversation. And what I would do is, the way you ask the question I would say, depends a bit on your own personality. So when you're out with a friend, or when you're out with a partner, or when you're out with anybody, catch yourself asking the question when they are about to not buy something. So you've just gone on a shopping experience, you've just gone to buy something, and see what kind of terminology you use. And I think you'll feel the most comfortable with that kind of, instead of me saying, use these exact words, I would say use the words that make you feel like a human being. Okay? So,
right.
Yeah.
Can I ask you just another quick question, just connected with that theme? And it might sound like a big repetition to what is already being said, but I just wanted your comment on that. So when you say, like, someone's biggest problem, and then you said, it can lead to a whole confusion, so stick to the point. I was like wondering if, like, this question should be asked in the sort of context of, your business and that sphere of activity of that person's, experience. So say, for instance, using the example of the shoes, from the brain audit. If you're in the shoe business, then you could provide, a solution to a shoe problem.
Yep.
But if you're dealing with, a woman in menopause, you don't want to know all the problems related to menopause. It has nothing to do with your expertise. So, you know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is, when you're asking for biggest problem, you first have to be clear of what kind of service that you're intending to provide, and in that sphere of experience, say what kind of problem you're experiencing, right?
So,
would that be correct? Do you agree with what I'm saying?
So yes, you have to.
Because otherwise,
yeah.
if you say problems, it's huge. It could be universal.
Yeah. So treat this as going to the cafe. So you're going to the cafe with a friend. Now, 9 out of 10 times, or 99 out of 100 times, when you go to the cafe, it doesn't matter what you're going to talk about. But one time you go, I want to talk to you about this specific thing. And it might be, I'm going to leave my city and go somewhere else. I want to talk about that. So I just want you to come to the cafe, and I just want to talk through with that. That's the difference. You have now set an agenda. The client knows the agenda. If you just go into the client and go, we're just going to have a conversation, I'm just going to do an interview, they don't know the agenda. So yes, you would have to say, with regard to the yoga class, I'm going to ask you, your experiences and stuff, and I'm going to ask you a few questions. What is the biggest problem that you have when you go to a yoga class, or what is your problems that you have with yoga classes in general. And someone like Renuka would say, well, the problem that most people have when they go to yoga classes, when I see them training, is they're setting themselves up for injury. Most of those poses, they're wrong. They're putting strains on everything. So the problem is that there is the yoga classes, which are supposedly helping to make you more flexible, more whatever, end up being causing more injury. Now, the client has this insight, and the other clients who haven't read your sales page don't have this insight. So someone like Renuka would say, what I want is a class that focuses on yoga in a certain way so it doesn't create future injuries, which you can't see right now. And the rest of them go, oh, wow, I didn't think of injury. And so now you brought up this injury problem. They're all avid yoga goers, but they want to avoid injury down the track. And that's it. That becomes a problem. What you're saying is right. You can't just jump into it. You have to say, this is what we're going to talk about. So you narrow it down.
Mm-hmm.
You don't look convinced.
Yeah, no, it's because, my problem, I'm going to tell you my biggest problem.
Yeah. We'll come back. We'll come back, Susie, just in case there are others.
Sorry, sure.
It's not a problem.
Sorry.
It's just, in case there are others.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just a clarification on that.
Yep.
As part of the target profile interview preparation, are you saying like, oh yeah, just make sure you give them a heads up of like, this is what we're going to talk about in an agenda, so that they're mentally like collected to enough to talk about it? I mean, I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes. There are people like you can wake me up at any point of the day or night and ask me questions. I don't have to think about it. I can give you a very coherent answer. And there are people like Renuka who can be just as wide awake, but not prepared. And she needs time to get the question, process the what's happening, and then come up with an answer. She needs that gap in between. So you're always going to have those situations where there are people who are going to have to think about it, and you're just giving them that space. Does that help? Are you processing it, Ryan?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I'm like that a little bit as well. Like, I think maybe a bit of an introverted kind of mindset is like, you're not always great at like on thinking on your feet necessarily. And just the tiniest little bit of guidance is like, oh, we're going to talk about this. You know what? That reminds me of the time that I had this problem and I didn't want to do it because of this or whatever. And it's like, great, tell me what that is, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and just a remark, I guess, to Susie as well on the finding the objections. I've noticed, like, ever since I first read about that in the brain audit, I've always noticed this happening, not just for business, but for talking with friends about whatever. And I mean, I really agree with the conversational kind of aspect of things to really, figure out like, well, what's stopping us from doing this, or whatever. The only thing is, it's absolutely key. It's got to be pertinent to that person, right? So like the target profile's got to be the right person to be talking to. I hate it when I get phone calls or people ask me about like, when are you interested in this product? I'm like, I don't care at all, right? They're like, what's stopping you from proceeding? I'm like, it's that I don't care. I don't care. Leave me alone. Don't want to talk to you. That's not valuable to you. You're not getting an objection. It's not a valid objection. I don't care. I mean, you're talking to the wrong person, right? So just make sure that, of course, we're already kind of assuming we're talking to the right target profile, but that's really important. Another example of this is kind of a goofy example, but I can't help myself, is I wanted to get Nerf blasters to play with my son. And I was talking about it with my wife, and she's like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be fun. I think it's going to be great. And then I was like, wait, there's an objection. What's the objection? I'm like, well, what's going on? I'm like, is it the price? What's going on? And she's like, she started thinking about it. She's like, well, I don't want my stuff to get broken. I was like, oh, okay, well, we're going to play in the backyard. None of your vases and things are down there, right? Oh, okay, well, let's try it out. So I was like, oh, I was totally wrong to think about what it was, right? But just a goofy example, right? And even in home life. So
Yep, that's precisely it. So the thing is, that you're not going to necessarily know what the objections are, and you might guess, but they're not. That's not always the case. So that's cool. Thanks for that, Ryan. Morag, let's hear
Thank
your.
you.
You're welcome.
I had a question which hopefully has an easy answer, hopefully. You were talking about using the testimonials as a way to directly address the client objections.
Yep.
Do you, so I guess when you're doing the interviews and stuff, you might end up with quite a few testimonials, and you might end up with testimonials that talk about different objections. When you present them on your sales page or within your website, would you try to edit each testimonial so that it directly addresses one key objection per testimonial? Or would you let it kind of just go the way the person had spoken about it?
So
Does that make sense?
yeah, it makes perfect sense. What happens in magazines and newspapers and stuff, they have what is kind of a pullout, a phrase that they put separately. And if you look at, I don't know whether it's on the news site, but I think it is there. What you can do is you can take something from the middle of a testimonial and put it as the headline of the testimonial. I didn't want to go to the workshop because I didn't want to leave my son behind and drive 200 kilometers. She doesn't start off that way. Nobody starts that way. But she said it in the middle. That's an objection. Okay. You put that at the top, and then you use like, I didn't want to go to a psychotactics workshop. I'm sick of these psychotactics workshops, you know. So
okay,
that's the way she kind of, so bring the middle to the top, run the testimonial with that line in it. So you don't have to remove the line from the original testimonial, but highlight that. So to just be clear about it, the line shows up twice, right at the top, and then wherever it appears in the testimonial itself. And it doesn't appear weird at all. It's just a pull out or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
That was exactly what got me to sign up for Sean's original Psychotactics newsletter, like several years ago. There was a testimonial from someone who was like, at first I thought it was yet another newsletter about, and I've got too many newsletters, right? And it was like, ooh, I have this problem, right? And that's my objection. And then I read the little testimonial. I was like, okay, yeah, that like pretty much was one of the things that tipped me over to sign up. And like, I don't know when that was, like 3 years ago or 4 years ago or something. I'm still here.
Okay. And in that testimonial, would you expect, would it matter if what the person has said or written actually kind of taps into and covers a few different objections, but you've chosen to use it as an example or an answer to one objection, and that's what you pull out as your highlight at the top? Would you leave those extra objection answers in, or would you edit them out for the sake of a concise, really punchy testimonial?
I don't tend to. If it's reading like a little dramatic piece, I just leave it there. I don't go around editing stuff as far as possible. Okay, so there is another podcast that talks about this with notes as well, and I can't remember which number it is, but that's a good hint for you to go and read this on a regular basis or listen to it when you go for a walk. But here is the thing. If you go to most modern websites, what you end up is with these little kind of scrolling things where you have a testimonial, second one. Those are small testimonials. In those small testimonials, you can address specific quick objections. So that's definitely edited because it's only got 6 lines or 7 lines.
Yeah.
But you can use that to just get rid of all the objections one after the other in those 6 or 7 things that scroll around.
Mm-hmm.
The longer testimonials, they talk to the client as an experience. So say someone is trying to sign up for an article writing course, for instance. It's very expensive for a small business to just say, oh, I'll just go and do an article writing course and write away 3 months of my life as well. They need to really feel in one with the person who's written that testimonial. And so that's when we put the bigger testimonial, which becomes an experience. And that can go for like 4 or 5 paragraphs. You don't have to feel sorry about the person. They're reading it. And when they decide they've had enough, they start skimming. But they read enough. This is a slightly side thing, but what we also do when the prices are higher is we create a prospectus. And the prospectus is a PDF, which means that people read it differently from a sales page. They do a lot less skimming because they've opened up a prospectus. The prospectus tells you how the system works, why we started it. It's kind of like a backstory. It's more interesting to read. And then there are, in our case, 75 pages of testimonials. And you don't have to read 75 pages. Knowing that there are 75 pages, yeah. But even if you have, even if you have 3 or 4 big testimonials there, that'll take at least 10, 12 pages. So it's, I would suggest you get one of the prospectuses from us and have a look and see how it works. And if you're in 5000 BC, there is a series there as well on how to create a prospectus. It's in a lot of detail, so check that out.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so one from Lana, and she said, we need objections, but then we answer them in the testimonials. Doesn't mean that we do not mention objections and object by ourselves on the sales page. So that's the first question. So objections is an entity by itself. Let's say the client has price issues, delivery issues, blah, 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 whatever issues they have. You definitely want to answer those questions. The 2 or 3 biggest objections that they have to be answered on the sales page. Sorry. And the objections, they play a different role. They play a different role, and they are clients who are saying the same thing. So both of them are needed. They're not canceling each other out, or one is not taking the bigger role and the smaller role. They're both separate bags of the brain audit. Both have to be treated as a bag with contents in the bag. So look at it as, I'm going on a flight, this bag can't be empty. So that's the first thing. Can we use objections for our YouTube channel? It depends on where and what the whole objection thing is about. I mean, whether it's in the video, I don't know where this question is going, so I can't answer it. But if you're selling something in the YouTube video, then yes, you're like, you're saying that, well, most people have tried to get travel agents before, but they always run into these problems. And then the beauty of the YouTube video is that it has to be information and entertainment. And so if you look at Dollar Shave Club, I think they ran these videos which enabled them to build. They made it funny. They put in the objections, but they made it funny. Like, so for instance, say you're a travel agent and you're having these objections that you want to put in your YouTube video. Well, you don't say, oh, as a travel agent, and you're standing there and saying, like I'm right now, and travel agents send you on this trip. No, you show someone on a flight at 2 a.m. in the morning, being kept at an airport, something. So this is going to be more work. You're thinking of it like video rather than in text, where the person can imagine it themselves, or in audio where you can create sound or sound effects and the voiceover to create that. So video is different, and Dollar Shave Club did that really well, if you ask me. So you might want to look at that. Cool. So yeah, and the third question is, do we go by ourselves there, or do we invite customers? I'm not sure what this question is about, so I'll just pass on that. Anybody else wants to jump in? And Lana, you can just clarify your question
Oh, hello. I just wanted to clarify if I create this YouTube video and I object to the most popular objections, do I invite customers or do I just object generally by myself, just as in the form of education? Hey, you could do this and that would give you more benefits. Or do I invite customers as in testimonials part of the sales page?
Oh
So
yeah,
what
yeah.
would work
Yeah,
better?
yeah.
Mhm.
You can do both. In video, you can do both because you can have a customer come in there and do a testimonial on the video itself, or you can have people on the sales page. Now when you look at reviews of any book, essentially they're objections. So why do you have reviews? I don't need to read a review. I have a book, I have the list. What are reviews there? They're all about objections. So you would think that they're all testimonials, but if you go onto Amazon, you'll find that there are people that are quite like pedantic, quite specific. I'm glad that this was happening because I didn't want this from that book and that, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll write this 1-page long review. People read those reviews because they're answering objections that they have to buying that book or on the App Store about buying one $2 product. So that's really what the review is doing. Your reviews in your YouTube channel can do that as well, but you can also have it on the YouTube channel, like as part of the video.
Okay, thank you.
So Ryan's put up the link to the Dollar Shave Club video, and he says the first objection is addressed in the 13 seconds. So there you go. Who needs another club to be part of? Yeah. So, Janine asks, do you have any advice on how to stop an interview sounding like an interrogation? I would say to begin with that when you go on TV, for instance, not everybody gets on, and we've been fortunate to be on TV a couple of times. What do you have is a very intimidating situation, which is, you know that there are millions of people watching, you know that you have to look your best, you know at some level that the interviewer doesn't care, they're just there to do a job and they're going to trip you up because that makes for better TV. So you're very nervous, and especially if you're doing this the first time, you're very nervous. But the interviewer won't necessarily calm you down, but in the green room, they will relax you, in terms of, okay, this is what happens, this is how it happens. I can't give you a prescription for what is going to stop it from being an interrogation, but I can tell you that anything that you would do to make a guest feel comfortable before you start speaking to them about stuff is what you would try and do in a target profile interview. Maybe some people would be happier with some information in advance. Maybe it's best to ask them, say, I want to do this kind of thing. What would you require from me so that it becomes a more useful situation for you? And they might tell you, and that stops it from being an interrogation. But also the questions. You know that if you're going to ask, you're going to say at the top, I'm going to ask you 17 questions. They're going, oh, okay. But if you say, I just need this one big question answered, do you think you can do that? So we're looking for a prescription here. We're looking for a specific line, but the prescription is just be human and see what happens when you start to be aggressive and what kind of reaction you get. And when you start to be, start to understand the person, what kind of reaction you get. And that's really the guideline that you need, rather than, okay, here's what will work in every situation.
Thank you, Sean. It's just that my target profile, the people I'm trying to help or serve, if you wish to say, they're also teachers, and it's a major blockage trying to get through to them. I don't want to sound nasty, but it really is a case that they know it all, they think they know it all, and they don't have problems. Basta. And if you try and ask them about how they feel about something, how what problems are causing them, if they have a particular situation, then they just say, "What's this? An interrogation? I don't have problems. This is it."
Yeah, that's going to be very individual, as in, I can't say offhand how your audience is going to speak. I would almost have to look at what's happening in your situation, which would end up being a bit of a consultation. But I can't say that. I can't specifically answer your question at this point because
No,
I don't know. Yeah.
I realize that, but I just thought it might have been interesting for other people here on the call to find out if there's, like you say, make them comfortable and what have you, to avoid a situation where they're coming back at you and saying, you know, is this more of an interrogation than an interview? Although when you're just asking about what kind of problems do you have, they'll just turn around and say, well, we don't have any.
Okay, that's, yeah.
Any.
Can I?
So
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan
was
wants to jump in.
I just thought, okay, my particular target profiles or target people or target audience, you might say, the language teachers, they're very special. And I don't mean that in a derogative sense, but they are very special and they are extremely difficult. But it could be situations where other services where something like this could turn up. That was my whole aim of my question.
Can I make one?
Do you mind if I just offer an idea of how you could put the question? What makes you, or what prevents you from being a more successful teacher? Would you put the question in the way that, like, something prevents them from being somebody they want to become? Am I clear on that idea? When you give them the purpose that they're teaching and they have some purpose in mind, right? And maybe you can offer them to get their desire, you know, to achieve something. If you put that question that way, maybe that could give you the answer. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but that was just my suggestion. Thank you.
No, it's a very valid suggestion, and I appreciate that very much. It's just the fact that I'm not teaching them how to teach. I'm teaching them. What I want is just to tell them, you know, when they are freelance language teachers, they're running a small business. And they are brilliant at teaching, but they have deficits in learning how to run a business. And they just don't want to accept this. This is the problem.
Right. If I could make one tiny suggestion. I have found sometimes that, like, starting off, I mean, when you're communicating with people about making them comfortable, sometimes it's useful to say things like, I'm just trying to understand how, not specifically what you're doing, but what it's like, what your experience is like, and sometimes phrases like, tell me a story about, like, what it's like when you're doing your job or doing this work, right? And then it's a little bit open-ended, and it suddenly can let the, you know, I think Sean said it in the podcast recently, explainer mode comes out, and they're like, well, you know, what I do is I go through this process, I click on that. Then they'll start bringing up problems automatically, like, oh, you know, what's really hard for me is I spend so much time invoicing or chasing down whatever, you know. It just kind of opens the door a little bit for them, rather than you being like, what problems do you have? Like, what do you mean I don't have problems? I feel like you're personally attacking me or something. You know, it's just another way of just saying, I'm just trying to understand, with the idea of, like, maybe there's some way that we can help you a little bit. And then you're not putting them on the spot to say, like, I mean, when you say to me, I'm an ocean engineer, right? So Ryan, what are your dreams for being the best ocean engineer that you can be? Sometimes, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to solve complicated problems, but I don't know how to do that better necessarily. they may feel like, well, I'm already doing the best I can do. I can't do anymore. What do you mean I'm not doing a good job as a language teacher? You know, then I think that's what you're kind of sensing is they're getting their back up a little bit.
You're going back now to trying to teach them how to teach. You know, this.
Okay,
it's
Janine,
yeah,
just to interrupt,
okay, fine.
I don't. I understand where you're coming from somewhat, but I don't want this to become a consultation. I just want this to stay as the question. So if you can ask this on 5000 BC, we have more space to do that, you know, to go back and forth. Otherwise, everyone is stuck for the next 20 minutes on this specific problem.
On this particular
problem.
No problem, no problem.
Yeah, just to be kind to me and everybody. So let's move along. Janine, if you can post it in 5000 BC, that would be really good. If not, you can email me and then we'll see how we can go from there. Okay. It might be something else, not necessarily what we're dealing with here. It might be the angle that you're coming in, but we'll deal with that later. Thanks for the question anyway. Anybody else have any questions? All right. So what was your learning, post your learning, and then that's going to finish off this call, and you'll get the recording as well. So if you want to listen to it again, that's cool. So just post your learning. Ryan, you want to jump in? What did you learn today? Just to put you on the spot.
I think that what was really reinforced for me is, you know, as it happens, I listened to the podcast that you had listed, and that's on the guideline for sales page link that you already showed here. I think that I really like the way that the entire process is laid out. This is so critical at, like, as you said, I think early in the presentation, outlining the bones of what really needs to be in the sales page. You know, it's engineers like myself love to cover everything to make sure that everything is there, you know, and that's too much information. It's too much chaos. And this is a way to cut through the chaos and find, you know, what's key that you need on the sales page. And I think that was emphasized in what was here, and that's really important. Focus.
Yeah, that's cool. Susie, you want to say something? No?
I think for me, what came up was that, you know, I'm doing a lot of thinking here of, you know, about the connection of, you know, this question, how clear, you know, I need to be with what it is that I'm offering before I can ask someone what their problem is. Does that make sense? So that's so in other words, I think I'm still struggling with you know, getting a very clear vision of what kind of service I provide.
Okay.
Because I'm more of a generalist, and so I you know, I do a lot of things, but I struggle in kind of getting a clear vision. And I did some interviews in the past, and I got a lot of answers, but I wasn't convinced that those answers were things that I personally wanted to tech with or work with, because, you know, I think the lack of clarity was coming from me, you know.
So that's a good point. So that's a good point. Just sorry to interrupt you, but I'm a generalist too. So first of all, you know, I'll talk about cooking. I'll talk about a whole bunch of things. Amazon is a generalist too. All the big companies that you know of, they're all generalists. This concept of specialist, or, you know, focus, it's not as crazy as it's supposed to be. It's not as great as it's supposed to be. You can be a generalist, but you can offer a specific advice or a specific section, a subsection. So for instance, I can say, we teach cartooning, but we also teach article writing. But that sales page is, and this is the whole point, every product is going to have its own sales page. So even as a generalist, say you're into yoga or you're into teaching people how to write or whatever, there are going to be subsections. In fact, in article writing itself, we have headlines as a course. We have outlining as a book. We have all of these subsections within one section. So if you take it as, okay, I do 20 things, and then we'll take one of them, which is article writing. Under article writing, there are 5 things. Your sales page or your target profile is going to tackle every individual thing, and that's what would make them say, oh yeah, I can focus on this. If you just say, okay, what's the problems that you have with yoga? Well, now it's too generic.
But can I ask you a question?
Yep.
So like your main message is, you know, I provide solutions for small businesses owners, introverted small business owners. So
Yep.
like when I think of you, I don't think of you as a cartoonist as much as I think like, oh, Sean utilizes cartoons to help people bring up their creative self.
Yep.
But not something that I would think of you as, you know, as a cartoonist. So like when you started, you were like, when you were doing your interviews for your products, were you thinking of, you know, you as cartoonist, or were you thinking of you as, you know, a consultant for small businesses composed of interviews?
I had no clue what I was doing when I started. All the stuff that we did was just random, no clue. We were just finding our way. And a lot of stuff that you look at it in retrospect seems like, oh, there was lots of strategy and lots of understanding. And there might have been. I mean, I came from a business family. I was in advertising. There might have been stuff that came along which made it seem like that. But if you ask me, did I know exactly what I was doing? No. What I did learn along the way was that people, they don't look at your business as a business. They only look at it as, what problem is this solving for me right now? That's it. So you could be anything to anyone, but if you solve, just think of yourself as, say a friend of yours can do 10 different things, but right now you want to put up a picture on the wall. Can she solve that problem right now? That's the problem that she wants to, and that's the kind of target profile interview you're going to do for people who want to put pictures up on the wall. They don't care that much that before that you were, you know, teaching meditation and something else. You've got this service, you can solve this service. To give you an example, occasionally we've had courses like InDesign. Now, InDesign is like Photoshop, but for ebooks and stuff like that. It's not related to marketing directly, indirectly, yes, but a lot of people signed up because I said, look, if you want to learn InDesign, I can show you how to do this in under an hour. And that solved that problem because they were battling with these ebooks for days on end, and they needed to solve that problem. Just to cut this short, it doesn't matter if you're a generalist. Whatever specific thing you're offering, that's what I have to be clear about. And that's what you have to do the target profile. And that's what goes on the sales page. And finally, that is exactly what the client is either going to sign up for if you've answered their questions and worked with it. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And please feel free. I know you don't jump into 5000 BC as often as you should. And here, this is minus points for you. But do this. I mean, it's much better when you have this ongoing conversation rather than, okay, there's a gun to my head right now. I have to ask the question. I have to get the right answer. It's much better to tease out what is really happening there, because then I can ask you questions and we can do this in an individual post. So I'm going to see your post today, I hope.
Thank you.
You're
I will.
welcome.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. All right. We're pretty much at the end. I'll take one more question or one more learning if anybody wants to. And thanks for the comments. I'm not able to read and speak at the same time. But thanks for that.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah, go
I
for
would
it.
use this opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just my biggest learning is that I need to concentrate on the problem. I need to write this problem on the sales page instead of, like I said, that standard thinking. My question would be, if I have a product that is slightly the same, I would say I have real estate in the same area, and there are 3 projects, like 3 villages that we advertise. Do I better create a target profile and just divide these villages one by one, creating 3 websites instead of just putting everything together? Because there is slightly different target audience as far as I understand now.
Okay. This is more a technical thing, but I'll answer it anyway. The 3 websites is 3 times the work of maintaining the websites and all the plugins and everything in those websites. It's what we've done before. We've, like most people, bought domain names and started new websites. And then after that, it's very difficult to keep maintaining websites unless you have a very good reason to have 3 or 5 or 6 or 7 different websites. It's probably easier to have one website with 3 different pages and then to drive that audience to those different pages. Now, bear in mind, this is if you're going through the internet. So let's say you're on YouTube and somebody can just type in blah, 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 / blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. Or you have a link there and they can go there. If the person is listening to your ad while driving to work every day or watching it on TV, then they're going to need a website because they're going to get blah.com or blah. I don't know what Russia has. So they have a specific thing to remember, and you're actually giving them less to remember rather than more to remember. On the internet, if that link is on the internet, they just have to click. No problem there. So then you can have 3 different pages, and they can go to those separate villages as 3 different pages. If they're out, if they're outside, you definitely want to have something. It doesn't have to be short. It could be memorable. Like there is a guy in the US, and he has something like insurancecompaniesdon'tmakesense.com, and you say, oh, it's not his exact one. It's a long time since I've heard the ad, but he would say like insurance companies cheat you all the time.com, and he would keep that over and over again on his radio ads. And the reason for that was it's normal language, and insurance companies cheat you all the time, or insurance companies cheat you.com, something like that. When you typed in that, it got redirected to his website.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
That's a very good idea.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be a short one. It can be a long one. It's like testimonialsrarelywork.com. And if you say that enough, people go, oh, testimonials, I remember that. I remember because it's normal, it's everyday language.
Oh, that's a very good idea. Thank you so much. That was another insight for me.
Okay, if we stay here, we'll keep getting insights. So it's time to go for a walk. Well, thank you all for showing up and for asking the questions and for your learning. And if you haven't posted your learning, please do. And I'll say bye for now, and thank you again. Bye-bye.
Till next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I love your work. Thank you for what you've done, for your brilliance. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.